Hey YouTube, this is going to be my top 10 countdown of the top 10 reasons why I think that modern music has kind of gone downhill. Um, I'm a fan of older music, as you can tell by watching my countdowns and my top 10s and everything like that. I'm a fan of classic rock and of music from even farther back from that, from the 1920s and 30s. I like some of that old jazz. My grandparents were in a jazz band. Nevertheless, I think that in this increasingly digital era, I think that music has started to get simpler and simpler and less idiosyncratic. There's less thought put into it, seemingly. And so let's get into this top 10. Number one on my list is going to be auto tune. I think that auto tune made it so practically anybody could be a pop singer, but at the same time, it removed a lot of the talent and hard work and practice that were put into those singers' albums. It just seems like everything has become almost like pink slime. It's more processed. Okay, let's get into the next entry, which kind of draws on number one a little bit, and that's that there's too many studio effects. Just the music as a whole, like I said, has become more and more processed, and I think that whether that's them auto tuning the instruments and adjusting pitch, adjusting people's voices, editing people's voices in, editing extra instrumental little bits into there. Number three is going to be drum machines. This is partially because I feel like it takes away jobs from musicians. I think that one of the big problems in music nowadays is the decreasing amount of instruments. There's less people. It's kind of like when they replaced all of the people at like Blockbuster and Hollywood Video. They replaced them with those shitty red boxes out front of 7-Eleven that like you had to go to that at 2 in the morning and get bugged or something. I don't know. I thought that was a crappy switch off. I would have rather gone to the rental store, but that's just me. Okay, let's get on down to number four, and that's going to be sampling. I think that sampling as a whole is responsible for a lot of the decrease in instruments as a base of the music. Um, Sampling as a whole really, I think, switched off from the foundation of instruments being the basis of every song to songs being kind of like a quilt, almost like a collage of different little bits of songs from elsewhere in the past. Um, and I personally don't like that switch off. I miss instruments being more the basis of things, because when they're doing sampling, we're not gonna get a second comfortably numb solo or something like that, and it just seems like it's a lesser form of art, in my opinion. Okay, let's get on to number five, which is kind of drawing on number four a little bit, and that's a lack of instruments. I feel like as things have become more digitalized and they've drawn more on computers and studio effects, drum machines, auto tune, and stuff like that, I think that um, just one second here. Sorry, something came up on my computer. Um, I think that as all of that's happened and things have become increasingly digitalized, there's been a reduced amount of instruments, as I already said, and there's been less jobs for musicians, and there's been less of a dedication from this generation in terms of this being like a musical generation. You know, like in the 90s, the rap generation was really fiercely dedicated. And in the 60s, look at all the hundreds of thousands of hippies who showed up to Woodstock. You could see the dedication, and you could see how the music kind of embodied the real flame of the culture. But the 2000s are kind of like they've fizzled out a little bit. There's not that same level of representation of the culture of the youth. I don't see it in today's music. I don't see today's music as representing the youth culture of the 2000s, or at least it could do a much better job of it. And part of the problem, aside from the lack of instruments and instrumental diversity, and just instruments as a foundation of the music, hearing, verse, chorus, guitar solo, and stuff like that, drum solo, hearing stuff like that instead of something sampled from a song 10 years ago, In addition to all of that, number 6 on this list is going to be dumbed down lyrics. When was the last time that you heard of people like Bob Dylan, Don McLean, Townes Van Sant, Joni Mitchell, Roger Waters? It's all sexualized now. It's romantic songs, breakup songs, songs about doing it. There's not really that much diversity. It's all something about love or sex. And a lot of it's quite chauvinistic or stupid. There's not a lot of intelligent, thought-provoking music being made today, and I think that dumbing down of it is part of why music has gone downhill in large part, because there's a lot less depth to the catalog of what's being produced. Number 7, um, this is a more idiosyncratic pick. This is just my opinion, but I think that a huge reason as to why music has gone downhill so much these days is actually iTunes and the lack of the fact that people own things in person. I think the fact that we're all dependent on paying an internet bill, paying a PG&E bill, and it's like you don't really own the stuff that you've bought and purchased and paid for. I think that things like iTunes are really almost like a robbery because they take away from us things that we've already purchased and bought and should be ours more securely. Like, look at this. This is my DVD collection. I've paid for that and I own it. It's mine. No one's going to be taking that away from me if I forget to pay some internet bill 6 months down the road. I accidentally unplugged my computer. Just 1 second. Okay, yeah, sorry about that. Number 8 is the increasingly digitalized music, which I've mentioned several times. I think just the huge amount of studio effects that they've put into songs nowadays, it makes the music a lot more processed and almost like musical pink slime. I think number 9 is a little less on the music industry and a little more on the people, and that's shorter attention spans. You don't see as many 9.5 minute long live renditions of songs like remember the Outlaws version of Green Grass and High Tides, or how Pink Floyd would often stretch their awesome version of Echoes, like for instance the one they did on Pompeii. They would often stretch those things to beyond 20 minutes. And they had other songs that they would do that with, like Comfortably Numb or Careful with That Axe, Eugene. It was very common back then. Look at Santana's version of Soul Sacrifice from Woodstock. It was very common for bands um, to stretch the live renditions of songs to a almost mind-bending length. And people were there, and they were sitting there, and they were paying attention, and they were following it through to the end. I think that today's generation lacks that attention span, and that's why part of why we've seen this shallower, shallower, increasingly shallower genre of music become the norm. Number 10 is a narrower spectrum of influences. You know, you used to see bands like the Allman Brothers and Marshall Tucker and Stevie Ray Vaughan and Double Trouble, and they would include into their music numerous different influences such as jazz, blues, country. Sometimes they would add music from other genres and other cultures. But I think that today mostly just draws on like rap, some elementary factors from rock and roll, and maybe techno music, and that's about all you hear. Um, but maybe I'm not giving today's music enough chance. If you have any starting places on modern artists that you're a fan of, I'm more than uh, I'm more than willing to give them a chance. I'm not close-minded, but this is my top 10, and this is my opinion on why music today has gone downhill a little bit. And I think these are some starting places on where it could pick up, you know, like writing better lyrics for songs, including more instruments, and I think just the fact that you know, if people paid a little more attention to the music, maybe they would start doing longer renditions again, and that would be pretty cool if we saw longer live renditions, like with Greengrass and High Tides, for example. If we saw stuff like that again, or the concerts that Leonard Skinner put on with their long ass version of Blue Yodel, I think number 5. T for Texas is what it's also known as. Anyways, thank you guys for watching this list. I love you guys. I'm out.